Hello, I'm Shannon Tiesi with the Diplomat, and I'm here today at the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., where I'm happy to be sitting down with Richard Bush, who's a Senior Fellow for Foreign Policy here at Brookings. And he's going to be talking with us about the upcoming elections in Taiwan and their impact on cross-strait relations. Thank you so much for joining us, Richard. So for us outside observers, this election is being largely framed in terms of the cross-strait issue. But how much of a concern is that for Taiwan's domestic electorate?
It appears that the electorate is focused a lot on domestic issues and what's going on with the economy, what's going on with education and that sort of thing. And that seems to be the reason for the Kuomintang's unpopularity, relative unpopularity. That seems to be why Ing-jeou, the candidate of the Kuomintang in the presidential race, is not doing so well. He's still in second place. But if one is concerned about Taiwan's future economic performance and its future security, you have to worry about cross-strait relations, and you have to think through the consequences of picking this candidate or that candidate.
So if, as the current polls project, Ing-wen of the DPP is able to secure the presidency, how do you think Beijing would actually respond?
First of all, the race does seem to be closing a little bit, and the problem for the conservative side is that that vote is split between two candidates, and if it remains split, then she will coast to an easy victory. It's certainly her race to lose at this point. Frankly, we do not know how Beijing will react. It has taken a pretty tough line in terms of what it expects from a Taiwan leader, what it expects in terms of reassurance about that leader's intentions and his or her party's intentions. President Ma chose a certain way to reassure Beijing, and that's worked pretty well. He was able to do a lot under those circumstances. Some people in Taiwan may argue about the consequences of that, and that may be what the election hangs on. We can interpret Beijing's hardline and size non-response or ambiguous response in a couple of ways. So first of all, this is the sort of bluffing that you would expect Beijing to do at this stage in the campaign. But that once the election has happened, it will find a way to accommodate. That seems to be what Ing-wen thinks. The second option is that it's not bluffing, but that it is not going to overreact. It will say, as long as Ing-wen doesn't accept the 1992 consensus or the essence of the 1992 consensus, we cannot continue business as usual in cross-strait relations, but we are only going to take some limited steps to reflect that fact. The final possibility is, number one, Beijing is very serious about the type of reassurance it needs, and that if Tsai is not prepared to do what it wants in a timely manner, then it will inflict punishment of various kinds, economic, diplomatic, security, and so on. And then you could have a downward spiral in cross-strait relations where the public in Taiwan is angry at the treatment it's received and feels that the new government has to push back in some way. A lot of this depends on how Beijing, or most specifically Xi Jinping himself, views the threat that Xi poses. and what it feels is the most sensible way to respond, at least in the near term.
So you mentioned that Beijing has been taking a fairly hardline stance in terms of drawing firm red lines that they don't want Tsai Ing-wen to cross. Has this position actually been having the sort of impact that Beijing would like, whether it's in terms of having a change from Tsai Ing-wen or a change in how Taiwan's domestic electorate is approaching the elections?
It doesn't seem that it is. In a way, it just reconfirms basic attitudes in the pro-KMT camp and the pro-DPP camp. And Tsai doesn't seem to think that this is threatening her position as the leading candidate. She, I think, believes that she has no electoral reason to be more accommodating or craft her positions in a less ambiguous way. And it may not be to her advantage at this point to do so, because it affects her strong support from her base. Now, what may be going on is what you might call a double bluff, that Beijing is taking this hard line and she's taking this very ambiguous position, a kind of hard line itself, and but both sides understand that there will need to be a mutual accommodation once she takes office. I don't know.
So watching these elections in Taiwan from here in Washington, D.C., obviously the relationship that Taiwan has with mainland China will spill over to affect the relationship that the U.S. has with Beijing. And the election will also have ramifications for US-Taiwan relations. So are policymakers in D.C. at all concerned about the impact that this election will have on cross-strait relations?
Well, a couple of points to start out with. First of all, when our official spokesmen say that it's up to the people of Taiwan to pick their own leader through elections, we mean it. And that is a principle that gets applied around the world, and we're not going to make an exception for Taiwan. At the same time, Taiwan and what happens in cross-strait relations does affect U.S. interests. This is not unique to Taiwan. This is true elsewhere. And we have enjoyed a nice period of almost 8 years where tensions have been lessened, where reassurance has been provided both ways, and where the areas of cooperation have been expanded. And that's been good for the United States because it's one less problem we have to worry about, and we have problems enough both in East Asia and around the world. One cannot predict at this point what the impact will be on US-China relations or cross-strait relations or US-Taiwan relations. They're all connected. And it's pretty clear that US policy towards Taiwan is a function of Taiwan's relationship with the mainland. It is my impression, though, that people are following this very closely. And they understand that our principal interest is the preservation of peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait area. We want that to continue. How we adjust to the new situation will depend a lot on the circumstances involved.
How much room for further improvement is there actually in the cross-strait relationship? Even if you had a candidate like Eric Chu be elected, someone who is devoted to carrying on Ma Ying-jeou's policies, is there still room for more growth in the cross-strait relationship?
This is a really interesting question because actually cross-strait relations was losing momentum even in Ma's second term. Certainly there continued to be advances in the economic sphere, but not as rapidly as during the first term. That's because the first term was harvesting the low-hanging fruit. And the issues that were taken up in the second term, most importantly, trade liberalization between the two sides of the strait, that ran into a lot of political opposition in Taiwan, particularly the Sunflower Movement and its occupation of the Legislative Yuan in March and April of 2014. Moreover, Beijing would have preferred a situation where the two sides moved on to political issues as well as economic issues and addressed the sort of long-term separation between the two sides of the strait. President Ma pretty adeptly deflected those demands. I think he knew, first of all, that the public was not ready for discussions or negotiations on those issues. Second, he understood, as President of the Republic of China, that there were significant conceptual issues that divided the two sides. Essentially, what's the status of the Republic of China? Does it exist or not? How can the Republic of China as a sovereign entity be incorporated in some sort of larger China? So, even if Zhu Lilun were to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, it's not going to get suddenly better in cross-strait relations. All the old issues will still be there, and the Taiwan public's resistance to going too far too fast is going to remain.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for joining us, Richard.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for tuning in. Once again, I'm Shannon Tiezi with The Diplomat.